Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing today? Good. Those guys are great, aren't they? Love them, man. They provide us with valuable and timely information. I had the opportunity to fly on one of the storms back in 1996. That was Hurricane Bertha, and that was in a C-130 aircraft. That was part of the hurricane hunters out of Alabama, right? Mobile. And then I flew out of their plane, a P-3 Orion, and I flew into Hurricane Ivan. Ivan was a bad storm. It was Category 4, and we were the last plane to fly into that before it made landfall up there near the Panhandle in Mobile. I got to tell you, we had a lot of ups and downs. we saw actually at one point a tornado, and we saw I don't know if they explained it to you, but there's also a situation where it's called St. Elmo's fire. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but on the nose cone of the plane, it actually started glowing in a halo green around it. Yeah, it was pretty fascinating. But that's a lot of fun, and you know, for me it was fun. I always say that the government should charge, admission. You can pay a bunch of money and go fly into a hurricane. So I can now say I used to only say I was in 2 hurricanes, in the eyes of hurricanes, and that was Hurricane Bertha in 1996 on the C-130 aircraft, and then 2004 I flew into the eye of a hurricane, right, Ivan, and I said I've only been into 2 eyes until last year. Now I've been into 3 eyes on the ground. Anyway, we're going to go over some of the things. I'll do the weather aspect of it. I'm sure some of you have heard about how to prepare, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. It's not like a tornado. You have typically a lot of time to get ready. A tornado, I think, is a little scarier than a hurricane when it comes to, wow, these things can get up to 300 miles an hour, these tornadoes. But hurricanes, the top wind speed, typically 200. And thankfully, Milton wasn't a 200-mile-an-hour windstorm. But the important thing is that you guys are here, because the majority of the people that show up to these hurricane seminars do so much better when a storm is around and when a storm is over. Otherwise, you're kind of just shooting at the stars. You don't really know what to do. But knowing what to do is the key to surviving these hurricanes. And I must tell you, you guys, all you were here for Helene and Milton, most of you. We have any newcomers here, new residents? Okay, we got a few. I hope you brought some good luck, because we didn't have it last year. The thing is that it was the worst season of ever, and I've been here 40 years, and you have to go back to 1944. That's the last time a Category 3 hurricane really made landfall into Venice, 1944. So we don't get hit very often here with these storms. That's a good thing. I knock on wood there, but that didn't work last year. So I'm still going to do it for this year. 1944, the storms weren't named. They didn't start naming them to 1959. So it was known as I think it was the Cuba, Florida hurricane or something to that effect. But it did bring a storm surge all the way into US 41 up near the Sarasota, the Sarasota Ford dealership in downtown Sarasota. So that was basically the Gulf of Mexico. That's the last time we had to deal with anything like that. Last year's storm system, we'll go over all those things. ABC-7, I've been working for them since 1985. I came from the University of Kansas, where we studied tornadoes, and I chased tornadoes before it was cool. I was out there in my Volkswagen Bug with my brother chasing one. Never saw one until I went back to visit. I was playing golf, and sure enough, the warnings went off. I looked down the fairway, and there was a tornado. It was a small one, thankfully. But we're here to prepare you, not scare you. I think that's been our motto for years, and for decades, for that matter. A lot of stations will kind of hype the storm up, right? And they do it for a couple of reasons. They need to sell soap, they need to sell cars, and they need to sell, dishwashers. So they get more eyes watching when you hype the storm up. But I can tell you this, that when there's a storm around, you should not be watching the national media. All right, the national media can really hype the storms up. And I'll give you some examples about that a little bit later. But if you stay local, and you notice I'm not saying just watch us only, stay local, you're going to get better information, more pertinent information for your particular area or neighborhood. And it won't be hyped up to the sense that, look out, you guys got to get out of here. This is going to be a terrible storm, the worst ever. And then if something changes, it's not going to be bad there, it's going to be bad here. They do that. The national media does do that, and they've done it in the past, and I'll give you some examples about that later. But we're here to prepare you, not scare you. There's last season's storms, and you can see it was a very active season. We had 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. Now, this season, the projection is for similar, but a little less. 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. What does that matter? It doesn't matter if I come up here right now and say, you know what, they're only predicting 5 hurricanes. They're only predicting 1 major hurricane. And they're predicting 7 in the named storms. Does that matter? No, it doesn't matter at all, because the thing is, it only takes 1, you've heard that, to hit our coast to make it an active season. If all those storms hit our coast, that I just said, 5 storms, you're going to say, wow, that was a really active season. But in 1995, we had 19 named storms, and not one of those storms touched our coast in 1995. So my point is to you, everyone always asks me now, what's the season going to be like, Bob? What's it going to, I said, hey, I don't know. It's going to be active. There's going to be more than the normal number of storms. Is it going to hit here? No one knows. And if anyone ever says they do, don't believe anything else they say after that, because it's not true. No one can project where the storms are going to hit this far in advance. Now, 10 days, maybe. Not very good with accuracy. 5 days, pretty good, but it's going to be off by a couple hundred miles. And that makes a big difference. We saw that with, Helene hitting the Big Bend area with a 16-foot storm surge, and yet that could have come here into Venice. We saw it with Milton, right? I mean, Venice, people don't realize this. I go into other communities up in Manatee County, I tell them, I say, listen, they talk about Anna Maria Island not getting a big storm surge. I said, Venice did. Venice got a big storm surge with Milton all the way down into Boca Grande. I mean, it did a lot of damage down here, and I didn't think they got as much news coverage as we saw with Helene and Anna Maria. But you see the storms, they were very active. Thankfully, it's weird, we were getting hit by the I storms. Remember that? We had the Irma, the Ians, the Idalias, and it just kept going. And when the Ivan hit Florida, well, last year, we missed it. We were hoping we'd missed them all. But that was the pattern. Each year, after we look at all the different storms, it usually shows a pattern. The pattern last year, you can kind of tell, was what? In the Gulf, right? You can see them kind of gathered there. Those are all the different storm tracks and paths. And you can see Helene causing big problems. The number, by the way, the name got retired. You guys know that? Helene will not be used anymore. And neither will Milton. Milton's gone. So's Ivan, so's Irma, so's Charlie, so is, all these storms that were really big and bad, they retired the names. So this is what I want to let people know. It doesn't take a hurricane, a major hurricane. The national media wasn't talking about this at all, but it caused a lot of problems. It was just an investigative area, June 11th, by the way, last year, that dumped 12 inches of rainfall in 3 hours, causing hundreds of cars to be wiped out in Sarasota, St. Armand's Circle, Siesta Key, even into near downtown Sarasota. So that was just a little system popped up June of last year. Doesn't look like much, does it? Doesn't look like that classic hurricane, but it didn't take much to produce all that rainfall. Eventually, it did become a storm once it moved basically east of Florida. Okay, this was Debbie, and you can see Debbie forming, organizing. This is when the hurricane hunters are flying into it, kind of getting pressure readings and figuring out the rotation and circulation. And then there's Debbie, became a hurricane just parallel with our coast. And you'll notice the rainfall, it just kept coming. And hundreds of homes were, wiped out, basically flooded. And if they didn't have flood insurance, they were out of luck. They had to rely on FEMA. And that caused, I don't know if you guys remember the name of it, what was it, Laurel Meadows? The whole neighborhood off of Bee Ridge was basically flooded, every home, because of that, because it brought 18 inches of rainfall. And that was in a short period of time. So we'll go to the next one now and show you that. That's the rainfall totals. We look at the rainfall totals after effect. You can see we're talking up to 15 to 18 inches of rain in the area of purple. So the whole point of this is to say, listen, it doesn't take a hurricane to cause big problems, and these things can pop up quickly, very quickly, in just a couple of days. You know, we tell you that you're going to get a 2 days warning, you're going to get that kind of advance notice. Not all the time. Things will change, especially early in the season. You know, the big storms we can monitor for long periods of time, but sometimes things just pop up, and sometimes they can stick around for a long period of time. This was the bad side of Helene. And Helene, you guys know what the dirty side is, the dirty side of the storm? If you're not familiar with that, it's everything near the eye and to the right of movement. Catastrophic flooding on the barrier islands. So that was the problem with this storm. On top of that, all these storms are different. That's why we give them names. They're all different, unique personalities, basically. This one was a huge wind storm that had its winds out 200 miles from the center for a long period of time. So at that time, when it was initially getting bigger and it was down further south, it was gathering water near the center. Charlie, if you remember, if you were here for Charlie in 2004, that was a Category 4 hurricane, by the way, and it had only an 8-foot storm surge. This had up to a 16-foot storm surge, much bigger storm. This was Milton. You know the cone of uncertainty? We want to call it the cone of inclusion. I talked to a hurricane director once and I said, I think we need to rename that. We're certain for 80% of the time that storm center is going to be within inside that cone. And notice the key word there. I said center. It doesn't mean the harmful impacts of the hurricane, which can extend much further out from the center. So people have gotten the perception, hey, we're not in the cone, we're good. We're good to go. That happened with Ian in Fort Myers. Now, Ian in Fort Myers killed 30 people plus, 36 I believe, when that storm surge came ashore. Now, you notice there were no deaths associated with Milton or Helene in Anna Maria Island or with Siesta Key because the storm surge got up to 7 feet. You can, get on your tippy toes, get on a chair if you're staying out there, and you can survive. A 16-foot storm surge, unlikely. And that's the big problem. People are not taking the evacuation orders seriously. But look at that forecast. That was pretty good, right? That was pretty good with Milton once it got started, right? Once the storm got started, the Hurricane Center was able to pinpoint that a little bit better. And that cone, by the way, is generated by the National Hurricane Center. No other television station is going to have their own cone. So what I'm telling you is let's go see what other person is saying about the cone. The cone's all going to be the same. It has the same error, has the same forecast. In fact, they're trying to say take out the middle symbol and just get rid of it altogether. Because some people think it's just going to be the middle symbol, that middle area. That's the most likely place it's going to go. However, I remember one station during Charlie showing just the hurricane symbol and not the cone. And I'm going, wow, that's pretty dangerous. They had that thing right on into Tampa. And then there was one meteorologist in Tampa who said, I stake my meteorological reputation that Hurricane Charlie is coming to Tampa. His reputation isn't that good, and he was way off. You can't say that with certainty. These things can operate very erratically. And I'll answer your question a little bit, just to remember that. So I keep going here real quickly. So there is the new cone. This is a new cone from the National Hurricane Center. Get a look at it. The thing that has changed is that it's just not the cone. What's included are warnings outside of where the cone is to give the people the reality of what they can expect. Because the mindset was that, hey, listen, we're not in the cone, we're going to be okay. Not necessarily. That's the reason why you see that blue and the red. Those are hurricane warnings inland. There's also storm surge warnings that are included with that cone, so on and so forth. Okay, this season. This is a graphic that's very pertinent for Florida. And I must tell you, the bar on the right indicates when we have La Niña. Have you heard of La Niña? La Niña is becoming a familiar term because that's what we had last season. Whenever I see that we're going to be in a La Niña situation during the hurricane season, I get really nervous because most of the storms that impact Florida occur when there's a La Niña. And we had that, a strong one last year. This year, not so strong. In fact, it's going to be neutral, so that would be your middle bar. That's not that great. So Florida is still going to be vulnerable, right? But where in Florida, no one knows for sure. This was last year. You see the blue bar? That's La Niña. You realize why we got hit so much? Well, because the blue bar was up. La Niña is the cooling of the waters in the eastern Pacific. When that happens, more storms can get into the Gulf because there's less shear, less winds in the upper levels of the atmosphere ripping the storms apart. So we're not in a La Niña, we're not in an El Niño. El Niño is the best for us because El Niño rips storms apart and keeps them out there in the Atlantic. Neutral, it can, it may not, it may, whatever. That's favorite words of a weatherman, It may rain tomorrow, it possibly could. 2025 forecast for ENSO, we call it now, El Niño Southern Oscillation, right? And so this is a projection by computer forecast models. And you can see the gray bar on the right during October and November. Those are our crucial months, by the way. October and November. There's an old poem that goes something like this. June too soon, July stand by, August it must, September remember, October it's over. No, and it's not. It actually starts to begin because in October, storms that develop late in the season tend to develop in the Caribbean and move up north into the Gulf. And then you have the fronts that come by and push the storm toward Florida. So, we have to be aware at all times. And people always ask me, and I'll answer some of your questions later, but what's going on, Bob? This is getting bad. This is, is this a sign that, we should get out of Florida and move to Montana? I said, no, you're okay. Florida just sticks out in the middle of Hurricane Alley as a sore thumb. You know what I mean? We all moved down here thinking that Florida doesn't get hit very often. But Florida has been hit. In fact, it's been hit more than any other state. But the west coast of Florida hasn't. The best place and the least likely place for a hurricane to hit is the west coast of Florida. Now, I don't say that to a lot of people because I don't want all the people from the East Coast moving over here. We already got enough. It took me 30 minutes just to go through a mile worth of traffic on I-75. But to give you this graphic real quickly, and I won't, it's the Atlantic Multidecadal Oscillation. And what that means, for several decades, you're going to have a flip-flop in the temperature of the Atlantic Ocean. And you can see the blue is cool. We love cool because cool means fewer storms. But red is not good. And the red on the right side of your screen shows that big hill. In 1995, I told you 19 named storms, that's when it began. So we're in this multi-decadal warming of the Atlantic. And if you must know, hurricanes love warm water. Without it, they can't develop. That's just the physics of it. So 1995, we started, and it's not over yet. So how many years is that? Math? 30 years. Multi-decadal, 30 years. Now, some of those lasted a little longer. And you'll notice the one blue next to it, that's when everyone was moving to Florida. Seriously, they were. They're going, we don't get hit by hurricanes. Look at this. We didn't. We didn't get hit a lot. During the time air conditioning was invented in the late 50s, people said, hey, called their neighbors up in Ohio, come on down, it's great. We got AC, there's no hurricanes. Well, now we're into this pattern. Hopefully, I'm hoping that in the next couple of years, we'll start to reverse this trend. In 30 years, that's enough, huh? Let's get back to the cool cycle. then more people will move down. This guy's great. This is Dr. Philip Klotzblau. It used to be Dr. William Gray, but he learned underneath Dr. William Gray, who makes projections and predictions. You've seen a lot of different projections of the hurricane season. This is the main group, and I had lunch with him. He's a good guy, great guy. He lives in Colorado, though, so he doesn't, worry too much about the storms. He just predicts how many they're going to be. I always liken him to this guy. What, me worry? I don't have to worry. I'm in Colorado, right? But that's the most accurate team in terms of predicting the number of storms. Here is the list. You see your name on there, anyone? Is anyone Andrea? Oh no, Andrea. I'll show you a slide here in a minute. You may be around quicker than you think. So there's the list. We expect, you don't see any X. If there's an Xavier, I'm sorry, you're not going to get your name used. If there's a Q name, you're not going to be used. A Z name, you're not going to be used. Zach, you can't use it. There's not enough names on that letter, to use in that letter, to have at least 6 to 8 storms, because you got to retire them so they don't use those letters. They don't use U either, so Ursula is out. But they do use W, and let's hope we don't get to Wendy. Because if we got to Wendy, it would be a very, very active season. When I say we, I'm saying I got to cover all these storms all the time. Sometimes I'm tracking 5, 6 storms. And I'm going, my gosh, I need a break here too. Normally I can just come into work at the beginning in summer for a week and record partly cloudy skies, scattered showers this afternoon, highs in the low 90s, lows in the low 70s. Expect more of the same for the next 3 months. And I just changed my tie and jacket and I'm good to go. But they haven't bid on that yet, so anyway. This is what I'm talking about. Andrea, is it Andrea? Yeah, Andrea. Oh, there we are. This is the GFS. And now I'm doing the weather aspect of it, you guys. You guys have learned a lot today, and you should. You should go through your brochures. But there is a weather aspect of it that people become a meteorologist when they're watching these storms. I think it's going this way. I think it's going. I had a guy call me today. He sells cars. He's going, oh no, this high pressure ridge over here. I say, okay, thanks a lot. I got to go to a hurricane seminar. Good talking with you. So that is the GFS. Now the GFS is the Global Forecasting Solution. It's the United States Forecast Model. It gets ripped up a lot by meteorologists and people that follow it. It is known for spinning up storms that never materialize, ghost storms. It projects the weather out, get this, 14 days from now. And so you've got people that are on the internet, by the way, making big money, that all they do is do weather on the internet. And they grab a slice of this. Now, I only took it out 7 days here, I believe, right? This is June, no, how many days did I take it out? Yeah, about 9 days. So let me show you something. I'll yell here. Oh, I can take this with me, right? Can I take this with me? Let me see. I can figure. I've been doing this a bit. All right. If you guys ever go to the internet and you look at graphics, if you only see this, you're going, oh wow, here comes a big storm. But you got to look at what this is. This has really started the initialization of the model 18Z. We use Zulu. Z is Zulu. Okay, it's an international date time. So that was started just yesterday at 4 hours minus 18, 14, 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So that was 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They started to run this forecast model, which takes over an hour to project. And for the date, Sunday, June 8th, it's got a tropical storm right here south of Cuba on June 8th. So that's the GFS. Do I think that's going to happen? Well, I could say, no, it's not going to happen. Until you see other forecast models showing something similar, then you can discount this. You can say, no, the GFS is up to its old tricks, and the media, and when I say media, will be on top of it. However, on social media, they'll go crazy with this. So look at this storm. If I advance this for you guys, it would show, and I'll show in a minute, shows that storm right over the top of us. Yeah, by June 11th. What happened last year, June 11th? We had Invest 90L, which dumped up to 12 inches of rainfall in 3 hours. So yes, it can happen quickly. And there it is. There's Tropical Storm Andrea, June 10th, right over the top of Florida, right over Venice almost. I mean, it looks like right there, the L right by Venice. Andrea, come on now, help us out here. So again, this was that same model run. I just advanced it a couple of days to June 10th. Now, is this going to happen? Are you guys thinking, wow, we got a story? We could. I mean, it's unlikely, but it could. And if we keep watching other models like the European and the Canadian model, then yes, we're going to say, look out, a storm's coming. The GFS runs 4 times a day. And I got to tell you, it's been very consistent over the last 4 days. Showing something popping up, showing something popping up. So when that happens, then you can kind of give a little bit more credence to it. So I'm a little concerned about this. I do believe that something will develop within the second week of June. Will it be right there? Yeah, who knows? That's what it was the same time, June 9th. This was, again, today's model. So that was yesterday's model and where it was. For Tuesday, June 10th. And then today it ran. I went to go look at it again today. I said, okay, I'll grab a still of where it's going to be. So now the model is projecting it's going to be there, off the Yucatan Peninsula. Same model, just a different time it ran. And so it's going to go back and forth. And that's why I was trying to tell that car salesman. I said, listen, you can't make any decisions based on a forecast that's 9 to 10 days away from now. It's just a highlight. Hey, look, there could be something out there. You know, in a couple of weeks, keep an eye on it. Make sure you got your hurricane supply kit ready to go. In this situation, which is a little worrisome, it has it as a hurricane already off the Yucatan Peninsula on June 9th. So these are the things we look at as meteorologists, and we try to play down the hype. So if I see some social media posts that are, look out, a hurricane's coming to Florida, I'll put in there, not necessarily. There's a lot of different things that can happen. I think it's a mistake to do that because you lose your credibility if you say, hey, a storm's coming and nothing comes, right? Are you going to go back to that person? No, I would. This is the same forecast for the same day, Monday, June 9th. You see anything out there that looks like a hurricane or a tropical storm? No. And there's a Japanese model, there's a German model, there's an English model, there's a European, and you guys have heard of the European. The European is known for being the best. It's not showing anything. So that's the reason why I'm saying that, is just be careful what you see out there and don't be too alarmed. This was a Milton. Milton, by the way, was a tough storm to predict at first because there were many different variables that come into play. And that's why the Hurricane Center, they actually said that Milton was a bear to predict at first. But things start to materialize, and when things start to cluster together, they have a defined low. And that's why those airplanes fly into the storm, to get the definitive low pressure. There could be several circulations, but they got to find the main one. Once they find the main one, they can then project out where that storm's going to go. And once they did, look how accurate those were. All those lines represent different model runs, different forecast models into the future. And they're all clustered around right here, right where the storm went. So the modeling is getting better, and I suspect in 20 years from now, AI will have taken over. And AI, by the way, I must tell you, was the best and most accurate forecast model of all of them last year, with no input from humans. Now, it stole information from human models and used that, but it did its own forecasting, and it was the most accurate. Who was here in 2004? Anyone? Yeah, we made it through that. That was good, huh? 4 storms. We had Gene, Francis, Charlie, and Ivan. This is not all at the same time. This is a composite, right? That would be scary. That would have kept a lot of the people away from Florida. But we got hit by Charlie, and Charlie was a small storm, but it had winds up to 145 miles an hour, and it wiped out a lot of buildings and structures when it made landfall into Charlotte Harbor. By the way, the same place that Ian pretty much went into. It made landfall into Cayo Costa, same island, same crossing, same Category 4 hurricane, but it was different. Ian was a much larger storm. Charlie was tightly compact, 25 miles in the hurricane force winds. Katrina, if you remember Katrina, those winds extended out some 200 miles from the center, hurricane force winds. Charlie was just 25 miles, just, I say. That's pretty big, though, still. But that was an interesting year, 2004. If you hadn't lived here, let me tell you, I was busy, and it seemed like it came every weekend. So I was there spending the night at ABC-7 with my favorite people. There's 2005. There's 2005. Look at that. I mean, that's a composite again, too, right? There's Wilma, we had Emily, we had Dennis, and we had Rita, all major hurricanes. So we went through 4, we went through 5. Thankfully, we didn't get hit here in 5. And you would think, wow, the world's coming to an end here. Hurricanes are hitting, all over the Gulf. And that was the postcard I sent out to everyone up north. Welcome to Florida. This is a little bit of the media. I'll get into this first. The National Hurricane Center makes these projections. They're into the game now, too, in terms of how many storms there is going to be. And so is many other organizations now, too. And like I said, I don't care about the projections. I really don't. I say, okay, that's good. That means we're getting close to hurricane season. All these people are coming out with their forecasts. I mean, I could start my own, I'll get a dartboard and throw some darts, and I'll say, this is what I'm projecting. So National Geographic at the beginning of the 2006 season comes out with this main article. It says, no end in sight, killer hurricanes. That's because of what happened in 2004, 2005. They put that out prior to the start of the 2006 season. No major hurricanes hit the United States 10 years after that article. And I think there were only a few hurricanes, not even Category 3 and 4 and 5s, but Category 1s and 2s that hit the United States. So again, it shows you that you can't predict where they're going to go and where they're going to hit, but you can predict the number of storms. So you ever hear of the Sports Illustrated jinx? If you get put on the cover of the Sports Illustrated jinx, the next thing you know, you're going to get hurt, injured, or something is going to happen to you because it's going to be wrong. I call that the National Geographic Hurricane Jinx. And there's the Weather Channel. This Weather Channel, stop trying to make Hurricane Week happen. It's not going to happen. They love storms, by the way. And quickly on the media, during Ian, I kind of got a little bit perturbed with them because they set up a few days prior. When I say they, the national media set up prior, a few days before Ian made landfall, in St. Petersburg. And they were all there, and they were going, well, the forecast looks like it's coming right here to St. Petersburg. And I'm going, okay, that's kind of, that's not the best to tell people that. That's where it was projected. That was the middle of the cone. But Fort Myers was right on the edge of that cone. And if you can imagine, if you were on Fort Myers Beach and you're on vacation or you're having a good time, you're having a couple of cocktails, it is the weekend, you're out there on the beach and it's beautiful, and you see the national media all gathered up at St. Pete, Clearwater Beach, and they're like, it's coming. Well, you're going, okay, I watched the news for a little while, I'm sick of that, let's get back to the margaritas and the Caribbean music, and you may never watch the news again. And a lot of those people may not have watched news, and it shifted, it changed. And sure enough, Ian did not hit in St. Petersburg. It hit in, Lee County, right into Fort Myers. So keep that in mind. Hey, we're number 1. Florida is the number 1 state to be impacted by hurricanes. If you look at all the data from 1878, and that's only to 2017. So we get hit here a lot more than other states. It's usually the East Coast or the Panhandle. It's not the West Coast of Florida. We're safer here for a reason. We're safer here because the Indians blessed this coast. I like that. But then someone said they dug up an Indian burial ground up in Pinellas County, and that screwed everything up last year, and that's the reason why we got hit. I think they may have even redid it, and they put it back together. But yeah, our coast is safe is because there's a couple of reasons. We have a huge barrier island. It's called the East Coast. All right? That's where the big ones hit. The west coast of Florida is at a latitude, at 27 degrees north latitude. We're at a latitude that when storms develop down here in the Caribbean, they tend to move northward. They don't usually move north and then make a beeline east. They have that curve to them, right? Well, the reason the storms typically don't hit here is a storm will come up into the Gulf, and those are the ones we have to be worried about, not the ones that come from, I shouldn't say that. We have to worry about the ones that hit the East Coast, but it's not going to be as bad. The ones that come up through the Gulf, they get into the Gulf, and either they're going to bend quick down into the Keys or Fort Myers or Naples, or they're going to stay on a track north of our latitude and then get picked up by a cold front that's coming through Kansas, or a trough of low pressure coming through Missouri. And then they bend off toward the Panhandle or the Big Bend area. Okay, so it's kind of a protection, is the fact that our latitude is the best for that. This is what we saw last year. Now, remember I told you about the GFS? The GFS is the American model, and they put hundreds of millions of dollars into it, the United States government did, to refine it and enhance it about 4 or 5 years ago. And they wanted to keep up with the European model, forecast model. Well, this was last year, the projection, this was done on June 5th. So that when I say done, it was initialized. It started on June 5th. And you can see that by June 14th, it had a storm system there, a pretty good tropical low, right? None of the other models were doing it. Well, in reality, the GFS was the only one that caught the first storm last year, that brought that rainfall. It was a little aggressive, it was a little heavy in the rain and wind, but eventually a storm did pop up. So that's why I'm not discounting what the GFS is doing right now. I'm not discounting it. And the European that same day didn't show hardly anything, right? Just some rain over us. There's no circulation, there's no center of low pressure. So the GFS was right. Did you want to picture that? It's a big green blob. A lot of lines on it. All right, be careful what you see on the internet. This was during Hurricane Charlie, I believe. And if you can't see it, right here, that's a shark going down Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa. You can imagine, say, oh my gosh, I'm calling up Sally in Ohio. There's a shark going down Bayshore. I got to get out of here. That was fake. And I can tell you this, that it's getting really tough to tell now. This was a few years ago, right? Think about it now, how fake you can do the graphics, and fake you can show hurricanes. I mean, it's getting bad. In fact, someone wanted me to put my voice onto AI. And that would be used, and AI is getting so that you can't distinguish it from the actual person. And the reason why they wanted to do that is so that, I could give forecasts 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not get paid for it, and it has all the words, and it has all the intonations and everything else. And I said, that might be good. But then someone said, what if someone got those and started saying, this is Bob Harrigan, a major Category 5 hurricane is headed right toward the west coast of Florida. Look out and run for your lives. And nothing ever happened. And people would think, that was Bob, man. He told me. Well, I didn't do it yet. I got to get guarantee that it won't happen. They're also going to eventually, with AI, you guys will have the ability, I don't know if you guys will, but someone will, in 10 years from now, that you can pick who you want to do and deliver your weather for you. Yes. If you want to watch yourself do the weather, and you're up there, you will have that information. It will be done through AI, and the forecast will be out. And the AI will only get better and better each year in predicting the weather, not just for hurricanes or tropical storms, but for day-to-day weather. And all it's got to do is read it and then just put it out, and you get a hologram of Bob or whomever you want, and I'm telling you, it's going to happen. I don't know when. I think I'll be out of the business by then, thankfully, and so they don't have to worry about that. But this is another example of what I'm saying, that when people say, it's going to be an average season, right? Average season. This was what we saw before last year's horrific season. This is the warming of the Caribbean and the Atlantic. And this area, you can say this is the hot area, above average temperatures. Everything in blue is basically normal temperatures. This was on June 5th, 2024. We had an excessive amount of heat here, and this is the main development region there. And that's where you'd expect storms to develop, and that was above average. Now take a look at that. There's not much change, is there? I mean, look at that. I mean, it's very minute. I went back to the shark. Anyway, so I'm worried a little bit about that. Whenever storms get in the Caribbean, this is when we have to be really concerned. Like I said, this is a big barrier island. If a storm's coming this way, sure, we could get impacted here, but it won't be nearly as bad because it goes over land. If storms cross through here, which is a very narrow pathway, right? I mean, you've got to just thread the needle, and then it would be dangerous. The worst part for us here is when storms start to develop in this area and then move up into the Gulf. And that's when we can get into serious trouble. So that's when we got to keep an eye out for anything that develops near the Western Caribbean, because that's when those are the ones that get us. The ones in the Caribbean and the Gulf are the worst. Now, you can see tracks of major hurricanes forming in the main development region, and I showed you the main development region right here, and you can see a lot of the tracks do that bend. It's called the big curve because of a ridge of high pressure that sits off here that kind of forces around them. And then this was below normal years. This is when everyone was moving to Florida, and there weren't many storms, okay? And then we started to get above average, and people said, well, maybe I should get flood insurance. Maybe I should get hurricane insurance. Maybe I should increase that. This was the energy prior to Ian. Now, this was 3 years ago, right? And look at that. Now, I think that was into the season, though. That wasn't in June. That wasn't in July. That was in August. So there was a lot of energy there in the West and Northwestern Caribbean. And there's where Ian went. Again, the cone is getting better and better each year. So that means we're warning less people. But there's still a lot of people that'll be under the warning in that situation. This error, by the way, from the center on the fifth day over each way can make a huge difference in what you're going to expect. And I must tell you that for every time you are warned and you have a warning and you're asked to evacuate, 4 times if that happens to you, only 1 time of those 4 there'll be an impact in your house or on your house or in your property. 1 out of 4, that's not very good. But you have to take each one seriously. That's my biggest concern with the season coming up, especially for the folks on Anna Maria. They think they went through a Category 3 hurricane. I think we all do, right? Does everyone think a Category 3 major hurricane? I mean, that's what it was. But it was the lowest end of a Category 3. And if you think that, oh, here comes a 3, Bob says it's going to be a 3, I've been through a 3, I can handle that 3. Don't judge that by what you went through. And you may have heard that from Tap Fumine, the EOC director. Don't judge making your decisions based on what you went through. I can tell you with pretty good accuracy that when I drove home, surprisingly, from work that morning after Milton, I'm looking at the damage, I'm going, I can't believe we're still driving. If this is a 3, there's a lot of people on the roadways. And typically what you're going to see is numerous trees down blocking many roadways. And a lot of the roadways were cleared up. And I would drive, and I'd make a long drive, and I would see some areas that looked really bad, right? They were tore up, the sheds and the trees were down. And then I'd come across another area a mile away or so, and it wasn't that bad. The signs are still up, I'm going, this is unusual. This is a weird kind of wind pattern. Because I can rest assured, if there's a storm coming and it's a Category 3 and it's expected to gain strength, you got to look out. It's going to be a total different story. It won't be anything like you saw with Milton. Milton, the highest winds, and people are surprised, the highest winds that were recorded in Sarasota County, in Manatee County, sustained were 90 mile-an-hour winds. We had a couple of wind gusts up to 100 to 105 miles an hour. Now you have to understand that the hurricane estimated had 115 mile-an-hour winds sustained. But there was no anemometer that caught that kind of wind anywhere close. And when you go up in wind speed, just 10 miles an hour, the destructive force of increasing that wind speed is exponential. So we saw a lot of mobile homes destroyed, right? Ripped apart, especially, by the way, with Ian. I mean, I went to Northport and saw just devastation in Northport in some of those mobile home communities. A different storm, stronger winds. Ian, by the way, was a Category 5 just before landfall. And you heard from the hurricane hunters, what they do is they make the call on what kind of intensity the storm is going to be labeled. And they sample that hurricane. They fly into the center, and if they find a wind that's sustained for a minute on average at 150 miles an hour, then they call that storm a Category 4 hurricane. Now that may just be the time that they're monitoring those winds, right? What happens in the meantime for the next hour before they do it again? It could have got weaker, it could have got stronger, who knows? It was a 5, Ian was a 5 just prior to making landfall. They didn't believe their instruments, in fact. They checked it, the winds were reading 160 miles an hour, but there was other planes that didn't get that high. So there could be just one little area in the hurricane and they'll call it a Category 4 or Category 5 based on that. But they didn't this time. They kind of said, no, it's not a 5, there's no way. But it was. And if you don't know it, it makes a big deal on your insurance claim. How many of you guys had insurance claims during the storms? Ian? Yeah, Ian. So in your insurance policy, there's a little paragraph, I guess, that says Category 5 hurricane, if it makes landfall into your area, then your deductible is waived. So you can, I mean, in some policies, that's the truth. So think about that. If they would have made that call on Ian and said, hey, this is a 5 when it made its landfall, then a lot of people could have saved a lot of money. I mean, deductibles now are what, $9,000, $10,000 for some policies. In fact, I don't even have insurance on my home. I own my home. You're going, wow, the weather guy is stupid. Man, I haven't had a hurricane insurance on the property since, I would say, 15 to 17 years. And each year that I didn't get impacted by a hurricane, I was supposed to take that money that I saved by not paying the policy and put it in the bank to have a fund in case something does happen. Well, I didn't do that. Well, let's put it this way, my wife didn't do that. She was out at the mall shopping. I'm just kidding. But you're supposed to do that. And you can only do it typically if you own your home at that point. But what I did is I made sure that my home was protected, right? I cut all the trees back. I have shutters. I have doors that actually open instead of in, out, right? I have a garage door that's reinforced, double reinforced. And the roof, I have all the hurricane straps and all my struts, all my joists up there. And I had someone come in and inspect it. And they said, yeah, you're good to go. They had to inspect it because Florida had a program back in the day, some 20 years ago, where they would pay half the money for hurricane shutters. I said, all right, I'm good. Because I used to make my own back. I was cheap, I still am, but I would make plywood, 3/4 inch plywood, put the things up there and do that. And now I use these, which are still a pain, but I figured, once I retire and make more money, I'll be able to get the ones where you just have it on your remote control, There's a guy on he's sent a hurt. I just hit that button, zzz, and then get in my jet and fly out of here. Yeah, man. That's after I get my GoFundMe page going. There was a guy, though, it's interesting. People have different plans. Everyone's got a different plan. Each one of you guys don't have the same plan. I went to a party after, I believe it was Ian, I'm not sure. I was MC for an event, and it was at the yacht club, and they're all saying, yeah, it was a bad storm. I go, what'd you do? He goes, well, we got in our jet. We live on Longboat Key, and we flew to Texas. I go, oh, okay, that's nice. I stayed on a hard floor with a pillow and predicted this weather. But then some people I talked to had to get in a car and drive all the way north, into Georgia. And what normally took maybe 5-6 hours took them 12 to 15 hours. And so it's all a different story. So you got to make that plan, you guys, and you got to have that ready to go when a storm threatens. Will you go when it's a tropical storm? Will you go if it's a Category 3? Will you go if it's a 5? A lot of people did. When they saw that thing become a 5 Milton last year off the Yucatan Peninsula, that's when everyone just said, we're getting out of here. But I knew it wasn't going to be a 5. I knew it wasn't going to be a 5 when it make landfall. You have to realize that a Category 5, there's only been, and that's why the insurance company does this, by the way. It's like throwing dice. They're the house. They know. There's only been 4 Category 5 hurricanes ever to hit the United States of all the years. Only 4. And guess what? 3 of those hit Florida. No, that's a question. She spoke up there. She said, aren't there 6 categories? Some people want to put a 6 in there. It's a media-driven hype thing. Some storms get up to the point of 200 miles an hour, and they say, we should have another category because it's exceeding the limit that we do these other categories by. And they do the other categories by 10 to 15 to 20 miles an hour, right? You jump a category by 20, and then the next 20 is going to be another category. But once you get past 155 miles an hour, it's going to be bad. And that's not me saying that. That's the Hurricane Center's response to that. They're saying, no, we're not going to mess with categories. A Category 5 is 155 plus, and telling people it's going to be a 200 versus 155, is that going to make a difference to them in their decisions? It shouldn't, because they should be evacuated by then already anyway, right? Let's think about it. You got a Category 5 coming, it's a weak 5. I think I'll stick around. It's not bad. Well, I saw, it's crazy the stories you hear about what happened with some of these. It's different, right, with all of them. The people that lost all their belongings at Laurel Meadows, and then you talk to the people out on the island of Anna Maria that lost a lot of theirs. So I saw a video of a lady that I was sent. It was a lawyer that sent me the video, and her house behind her. This was dark of night, winds blowing, water's up to here, and she's carrying her dog. And you didn't see a lot of this video because the daughter called me and said, "Can you not show that?" I said, "Okay, I won't show it," even though I had the rights to show it. But this guy came, and behind her, as she's carrying this dog out, water up to her chest, and he's out there helping her, the house was on fire, burning up behind her. Wow. And you stayed out there? Why do these people got to make decisions, and it doesn't matter. We're not that good. 1 out of 4, you're going to go, well, I left last time and nothing happened. Well, the next time something might. And that's a big problem. So, these hurricane cones and everything, just remember in your mind that when I say the Sarasota County Emergency Management Director and team has said evacuations are issued for this level A, level B, level C, if you're in that, why stay? Because, it doesn't make any sense. It could be bad. It could be really bad. You could get in trouble. A house could caught on fire. And you may have heard from the fire chief, with these lithium batteries, right? Lithium batteries, that's what everyone's getting now, with the bikes and the scooters and everything else. Those allow salt water to get into the battery and then create the contact and cause the battery to catch fire that you can't put out. So another thing with that is if you are in a home and you are asked to evacuate, make sure that you take those batteries and take care of them, if you have them. Unplug them, put them high in storage, or take them with you if you can. And take your Tesla and move it outside of that too. Because, here we go. Real quickly, because I know I'm running out of time. What time is it? 5 to 2. Okay, I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. We'll answer some questions here in about 10 minutes. I want to go through some fast slides, you guys, because I do have some slides here I want to show you. But like I said, Ian was a Category 5 just prior to landfall. It was a small storm. By the way, storms come in all different shapes and sizes. Look at that one. The one in the middle is the initial Ian. The one on the outside was the eventual Ian. It's called eye wall replacement. And when it goes through this cycle, you can liken it up to ice skater. You know an ice skater when they're finished with their finale and they're spinning around, they're all tucked in, right? They're all tucked in. That's an angular theory of momentum. And then in order to slow down, the ice skater does this. And that creates a drag. And so that's what it also does, it sends energy out to the ends of her hands. That's where the energy is being displaced now. So we saw that with Milton. It became a huge storm, windstorm. And on the air I said, everyone's gonna feel this storm. It's not gonna be a Charlie, because Charlie was so tightly wound up, but everyone's gonna feel this storm. So we look for these eye wall replacements. They're a big deal when it comes to that. That was the last radar sweep, as you see, with the storm Ian making landfall there. That was a monster storm. You could fit Charlie, and there's John Scalzi and I. We were trading off. We were passing the baton, so to speak. So we have to stay there for long periods of time at the station. Last year, we got to go to a brewery. You guys are laughing, but I'm serious. We went to a beer warehouse, and that's where we broadcast from. Because our building is in an evacuation level C and D. We're in C and parts of it's in D. And so the management made a decision, hey, we can't be here, we can't put our employees at risk. And so we know a guy with Gold Coast Eagle Distributorship, John Saputo, a friend of mine. And we headed over there, and John saw me after my shift. He goes, you want a beer? I said, yeah, sure. Pouring beers, you know, it worked out pretty well for us. You got to try to sleep, you know, I mean. But our storm surge is the biggest problem for us. You know, you guys saw what happened down here in Charlotte Harbor and Punta Gorda during Milton. I mean, it was bad. But think about this, the tallest storm surge that's possible for our coast in Venice, 18 feet. 18 feet. That goes, by the way, if it's the worst case scenario, all the way out to, you know where Laurel Road is on I-75? That's how far the Gulf of Mexico would be in a worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, all the way out to Laurel Road. Northport, Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda area, the highest storm surge there can be 28 feet. 28 feet. Now, when I say that, it's not just a 28-foot wall of water, right? It's the rising of the water to the right and near the center. And because that harbor no water can't go anywhere, it just builds higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And it can be delayed sometimes too after the winds even come down. And it's because of this shelf too. This is a gradual shelf off the coast of Florida where the water can't dig deep. It just runs into sand and it builds up higher and higher. So a little bit about that, and this is just some stuff about Ian. Look what it did to the bridge there, Sanibel. You guys have been on Sanibel, some of you. It just wiped it out. Direct deaths were very high, 66. But an important part of this graphic, and this is the last point because I know you guys got to get going, you have some questions for me, but I have a lot more. I could go on forever, you know, because on the television they only give me 3 minutes. So when you give me the mic up here, I'm going on forever, man. So the direct deaths were 66. And what we mean by direct deaths is that during the storm, you drown, a tree falls on your house, it kills you, you make the wrong decision to go ride in your car and try to get out of harm's way, and the wind blows you off the road. Direct deaths, another thing would be, you know, the building falling apart around you and falling on top of you. That's a direct death. A direct death is also storm surge, right? Storm surge comes in and it killed, with Ian, as I said, over 30 people on Fort Myers Beach died because they thought the storm surge was, it's not gonna be that bad. 83 indirect deaths. That's what I want to alert you guys to. Have you heard about this? This is what's happening, is that people are taking the warning seriously. However, they're not realizing how dangerous the storm is prior to the winds picking up and after the winds have moved on. People have died. More people died from Milton with indirect deaths after the storm moved through and before the storm arrived. People are going, wow, nerves, heat, stress, right? That's before the storm. Heart attacks go up That's why you come to these meetings, because you prepare and you're not as frantic. Oh, I got to get to Home Depot. I forgot to get water. Well, no, have that water ready to go. I've got to get shutters. No, you have your shutters ready to go. So have everything ready to go prior to the start of the season or now. And then when the warnings are issued, it's not as stressful because you've got everything handled. A lot of people got generators now. So know about generators and what to do with generators. You know, if you've got it, you should start that up every month, by the way, after the season is over. And during the season, every month, start it up. Because if you don't, it may not work when you need it after the storm. I've got one. I've had one ever since Charlie. So I've had it over, 20 years. I start it up. Sometimes I'll miss a month. But I make sure there's no gas in the carburetor. So there's all these little tips to the trade, right? But remember, after the storm, I almost was one of those statistics, by the way. My house took a beating. I had fascia ripped off. I was going to make a slide for what I did because I was proud of it. But, you know, like I said, I have no insurance. So I'm worried as heck at the building going, oh, no, this is going to be it. Oh, I played my cards, and now I may have lost. Well, I came home, and sure enough, no trees on my house, but a huge oak tree. I mean, the base, I couldn't even get my arms around it, fell onto my shed that I just built 2 weeks prior with about 1,500 screws. And I got to tell you, it was in the hot of summer. And before the storm came, I told my wife, I brought her out, I said, hey, listen, you need anything in this shed? And she goes, why? I said, it's probably not going to be here after the storm. Because, you know, I was thinking it was the wind that was going to take it out. But I had this huge oak tree, you guys, that, you know, had it been this way, my house is here, had it been this way, I would have said, no, we're taking that down prior to the season. But it was one of those oak trees that are hanging like that, right? And there's only one way for it to go. It's not going to be able to go that way. It's going to go that way. And that is where I built my shed. So when I got home, the shed was destroyed. I said, that's okay, it's a shed. And then my boat was sitting right there. I got a little 18-foot boat, and I always say, it's in my backyard. Oh, you live on the water? He said, no, it's just in my backyard. And I haven't taken the boat out in a while, but it fell, and all the branches were on the boat, right? And I went up in it and looking around, I said, it's not too bad. You know, the center console, you know, has the bars you can hold on. That was bent a little bit. I said, all right, that's fine. And then the fascia on the garage was ripped off, and then the, what do you call it? Soffits, thank you. Soffits were ripped apart in some places. Like, okay, this is not bad. There was no structural damage to the home. So I made out. You know, the average claim after Hurricane Charlie, I think, was in the neighborhood of $5,000 or $6,000. Average claim. You got to think about that. The deductible is $9,000. You're going, well, what the heck? Why do I have insurance? If the hurricane's coming, wipe it all out. Forget about this, you know, little stuff. But the only thing I had insurance on that whole property was the boat. And I don't know why I did it, but I had insurance on that boat. It's only worth about $6,000. And the lady comes out, looks at it. I had to cut all the trees back. And she goes, yeah, okay. Comes back and says, we'll give you $4,600 for the boat because you have insurance and you have to get rid of the boat or you have to take it to a salvage yard. I go, okay, thanks. She calls back and says, you know, you can negotiate that. I go, oh, really? I said, what do you mean? She goes, well, we'll give you $4,200 and you can keep the boat. You don't have to salvage it. I said, all right, I'll take that. The boat's still good. I made out. And just one quick other story about the tree. I'm kind of, like I said, a cheap guy, right? You know, you got to save money. You work in television. I get paid just above poverty. But I had to look at the tree, and I said, I'm going to cut it down. Because the first guy that came by said, I go, how much for the tree removal? He goes, it's about $6,000, maybe $7,000. I go, what? I said, let me go talk to the wife. You know, I went around the corner. I didn't talk to the wife. I said, okay, no, she's not good with that. and then I went, I got my saw, 18-inch saw blade, right? And I started cutting it down, cutting it away from the boat and everything else. It was hot, And I'm going, okay, we'll wait for someone else to come by. Someone else came by. I said, okay, how much for that? They said, $5,500. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Let me ask the wife. And then my wife got a call from her sister saying, oh, these guys are from Orlando. They're working with FPL. They're kind of contractors. They just did the neighbors across her street, and they did it for free. And I'm listening to my wife say, free? No one does anything for free. Come on. So I said, okay, yeah, bring them over. Come on over. They look at it, and I'm helping them out, being real nice. You know, you want some water? And they look at me and they say, pulls me over and says, you know, this probably is going to be about $5,500. I go, okay, thanks. Well, let me think about that, and we'll get back to you. I kept cutting, and I cut that thing all the way down to, you know, the 18-inch saw blade couldn't do no more, and it was just about this tall. There's one branch that was hanging out, and that was my last big branch, and I'm cutting it down. I'm on a step ladder, right, with a chainsaw. There's the weather guy. And my daughter's videotaping it with my wife off in a distance because I'm yelling, timber, you know, and sure enough, that tree branch broke off and kind of caught the ladder. Here I am with the running chainsaw. Boom! I threw the saw, landed thankfully on some of the chips that I had sawed, and it was a nice soft landing. But that could have been me. I mean, I could have been in serious trouble, you know, just trying to save a buck. So my point is to you is don't do anything you probably shouldn't be doing. And by the way, I did replace my shingles on the roof. My neighbor goes, what are you doing up there, Bob? You could have fallen. Well, you know, I'm adventuresome like that, and I may become a news story one day, so you guys will remember. I said, there's Bob. He said he was going to be on the news. He usually does weather. Anyway, I'm going to answer some of your questions now. I know that you had a question. Yeah, okay, so here's the question is this. Why did Milton start in a place that we normally don't see storms develop? And I'll get to a graphic here eventually. That will show that. There's Texas. So typically storms that develop out here in the Western Gulf go into Texas, go into Mexico. Late in the season, though, everything usually has to bend back in our direction. That was the worst case scenario that I've been talking for decades. The worst case scenario for Venice is for a storm like a Milton to develop in the southwest Gulf of Mexico.
But why?
It develops anywhere it can, and what happened is it called a Central American gyre, all right? And what that is a low pressure area that's gathered right around Central America. And it's within this gyre, and that's where we think you're gonna come out of next week. But it's in this area, and a little low pressure will come out. But a low pressure was over New Mexico, right? So you had a low pressure, just a regular storm, low pressure system, winds rotating around like this, was bringing that up into the Gulf, the southwest Gulf of Mexico. So you had this disturbance, and that's why it was so difficult to forecast. But a storm can form pretty much anywhere where the water temperature is above 80 degrees and there's no wind shear. It's not a typical spot for a storm to form and move into our direction, but since it was in October, any storm that develops in the Western Caribbean or in the Gulf, Southwest Gulf, we are vulnerable to getting. Typically late in October, you're not going to get that in that southwestern Gulf because so many storm systems and fronts are coming by now that it pushes everything away from Texas and Mexico. But because that low was over New Mexico and it was spinning like this, that it brought that system up into the southwestern Gulf. And as I said, in October, you guys, October is the worst month. And I've said this for decades. I said the worst case scenario is for a storm to develop in the western Gulf and head east into Florida. And I must tell you, that doesn't happen very often. You can only find a couple of times that that's happened. But that we know of. You know, we always say it doesn't happen very often. You know, we're only here for a short period of time. There's been a lot of stuff that could have happened that we didn't know about, you know, that we just don't have a history of. But nothing surprises me when it comes to hurricanes. I mean, if it's never happened before, it doesn't mean it won't happen. It's going to happen. I mean, you know, with Harvey, Hurricane Harvey, you guys remember Harvey? It hit down near Brownsville, but then Houston got hit the hardest with the rain. You know how much rain fell with Harvey? 60 inches of rain. Now, you think what you saw with hidden, I'm talking about Laurel Meadows, the homes there, it doesn't matter what kind of infrastructure you have. 60 inches of rain. And it could happen here. That's the worst case scenario for me. Not that I don't care. I mean, the category 5, that would be just devastating, catastrophic, but we could survive it. 60 inches of rain hitting this coast in a course of 3 days, you are going to have catastrophic flooding. So anything can happen, yes?
Well, thank you for coming. A couple things. First, I'm shocked you don't have health insurance.
I have health insurance.
Oh, house, I meant to say, sorry.
Oh, no. I'll tell you why. Because my father-in-law told me, since you own the house, Bob, you can, if you protect it properly, and I know how to protect a home so that it will sustain only minimal damage if you have hurricane shutters. So even the damage I saw with this last hurricane was below any kind of deductible I could have had. I fixed it all myself, and it was under probably $400 that I fixed it all.
Oh, that's great. And my question is, you said that you did 3 rides with the hurricane chasers, and I was wondering, did you hurl on any of those 3 rides?
No, they asked me that. The pilots asked me. I did not throw up. My photographer, he weighed about 280 pounds. And get this, we drove down to Miami to get on the plane. It was a C-130. And we, after 11 o'clock news, drove 3-4 hours down to Miami Homestead. We stopped in Venice at the store there off Jacaranda, the little store, and the bill came to $6.66. I go, oh no, this is not good. That's the sign of the beast. We're going into the beast. He took a Dramamine. I mean, I took a Dramamine. He did not. He got sick. So we're flying into the hurricane. It's up and down. We're strapped in at first, and then the pilot says, "You're free to take some video of the window, right?" And so I'm looking at my photographer. He's like, "Okay, where's the camera?" I grabbed the camera and I shot the video because I took a Dramamine. And then the one funny thing about flying into Ivan, the Terrible, we were the last plane flying into it. The day before, it was a Category 5. There were 6 planes at the same time flying into that storm, gathering data. And this time, it was just us. And we took off at night, as I said, and we saw the halo. And then all of a sudden, we went, and I go, okay, here we go. Roller coaster ride. This is fun. They need to start charging money for that. And after we got through that, you hear on the radio, because he gave you a headset to listen to, and one pilot goes, everyone okay? Everyone okay? Yeah, everyone's good. And the one pilot goes, no, I got a little problem. And he goes, what's that? He goes, I just spilled my dip cup. He was chewing tobacco. So that was it. And it was kind of interesting. Go ahead.
What is your opinions on cloud seeding?
Okay, so cloud seeding, by the way, it's a big bill that just came up in Florida, and Governor DeSantis, I guess, shot down any kind of weather modification that goes on. Cloud seeding, if you don't know about it, is modifying weather, right? And the theory is, back in 1960, there was a project called Project Storm Fury. I talked to a couple of the people that were on that project back in 1960. And the theory is you seed the outside feeder bands of the storm with silver iodine to increase the development on the outside and steal the energy away from the inside. That was the theory. So you seed the outside to gain strength out there. And remember I said that it will spread its wings, right? And it won't be as tightly wound and it won't be going as fast. So that was the theory. They tried it in 1960. And there's some truth in speculation. It's been kind of a wives' tale down the road that because they seeded a storm that hit Louisiana, I believe, or Mississippi, this is what I was told, that they seeded the outside of it. It seemed to have some impact, but not measurable, that they could say it was because of that. Because hurricanes go through stages, right, on their own. And then the storm dumped an excessive amount of rainfall into, I believe, Mississippi or Alabama, or one of those states. And the insurance company found out that the government was seeding the storm in Project Storm Fury. So the insurance company say, okay, well, you're taking care of those claims. We're not, because you guys messed with the storm. Now, will it work? AI will eventually figure out a way to maybe minimize a storm. When I say minimize, they can never get rid of them altogether. Some people have thought, well, let's blow them up with a nuclear bomb. Well, it might work. The nuclear fallout will probably be worse, but that's okay. Bill Gates was come up with an idea that actually has ships that are tied by an umbilical cord, so to speak, and they have deep tubes that go down several hundred feet into the water and pump the colder water up out ahead of the storm. Best idea I've heard. My theory is that, okay, we've got to have these hurricanes because they displace energy, right? They take the excessive heat and move it to where it's colder. And if you didn't have that, you think it's hot here now, it would be way too hot to live here. But my theory has always been, okay, we got to have them. Let's have them in the happy place, in the Atlantic, where they only impact fish and shipping interests, okay? Well, how do you do that, Bob? Well, how much money have we spent and lost because of hurricanes? Now, this is becoming more serious now. I'm getting old. Maybe I'll start something here. I say build a big line of fans along the east coast of Florida, and you have them come up only during when there's a hurricane. And they're solar generated, you know, it's good. And you just have them, and it blows them out there into the Atlantic. It doesn't make sense. The other one is, my other theory is that because of the African dust, you guys have heard of the African dust? You know, it only goes on, by the way, for June and July, and it's over in August, and that's when we start getting bigger storms. I say put a bunch of fans in the Saharan desert and just blow that dust constantly off to the west. There's no way you can do anything, but cloud seeding could eventually work, right? Someone came up with a theory that if you put in this biodegradable absorbent material, that you can steal the moisture away from the hurricane. And Dr. Lancy studied that and said, okay, you would need to have a continuous sortie mission of hundreds of planes dropping this in just to drop it down 5 miles an hour. So they're too big. They're too big to control. We just have to learn to live with them and build the structures around them. I got a couple more questions. I'm going to run late. Yes?
Did I hear you say that AI was the best prediction of last season? So what does AI say about this season?
Now, when I said that AI, which is artificial intelligence, was the best predictor, the European AI model, by the way, was the best predictor for the path and track of Milton only. Yeah, I'm not aware that it does any long-range prediction for the season, but it did the best for Milton last year.
Will you use AI?
Oh yeah. We have access to look at it and see what it's doing, and believe me, as it becomes more refined, because it learns every time, right? It figures out its mistakes. It gets better and better each and every year. So that's what. But anyway, real quickly with that moisture absorbing material. They tried to work on a cloud that was going by near Fort Lauderdale, and they were watching the cloud, and they did it, and then the cloud went away. But have you guys ever been to the beach where you're watching a cloud, and then all of a sudden it goes away? It happens all the time. So how can you say it's material, right? It's the material they put in it. But anyway, my point is always you have to live with them, but make sure you have a plan.